This video is going to look at the relationships between the radius, the diameter, and the circumference. If you take a look at the picture on the screen, it shows you that all the way from one side to the other is the diameter, and from the center of the circle to the outside edge is the radius. The relationship between these two are that the radius is half of the diameter. On this first slide, what it says is we want to determine the relationship between the diameter and the circumference. So I am going to underline those two things. Now when you look at the circle and you go all the way around it, it has 3 arrows. The part where these arrows are is supposed to represent a segment, and they represent the diameter, or the length the diameter would be. So if I put one letter D right here, one letter D right here, one letter D right here, each one of those is supposed to represent a diameter. How long the diameter would be takes 3 of them to go around. Pretty close. Now the formula to find circumference, if you know the diameter, is pi times diameter. Okay, this question already tells us that the circumference is 15.708 feet. Now, if I were to need to know how long the diameter is, I could use this formula. And instead of saying C equals right here, I would go ahead and put the number that they're telling me it's supposed to be. So the circumference is 15.708 equals pi times diameter. Now the diameter is what I don't know. I do know that always pi, does anybody remember how much that is if you're in my class? Hopefully you just said 3.14 or 3.14. So that's another number that I can fill in. 15.708 is equal to 3.14 times diameter. Now for me to figure out this missing number that goes there, 3.14 times something, I don't know what it is. So in order for me to work backwards, I do the opposite of multiply. I would divide. Now I'm not really going to divide this. I'm just going to set this up. 15.708 divided by 3.14, and that is equal to diameter. Sometimes you might not know the number and you need to just set it up using symbols. There's 2 things we could do. We could either say C divided by D equals pi, or we can say C divided by pi equals D. And I know that might seem a little bit confusing right now because there's no real numbers. However, sometimes it wants you to set up the numbers how they are related to one another, how circumference and diameter are both related. So this one is often used so that you can tell how circumference is related to diameter. You always would do circumference divided by diameter if you knew how much the diameter was supposed to be. If we're trying to find diameter, then this would be the way you do it. Now on this next example, it says, what is the relationship between radius and circumference? I'm going to underline those words too. Radius and circumference. If you think back to the last slide or the picture that you see right here, I still have my circle. My circle is still divided into those 3 sections, which told me that each one of these groupings was supposed to be a diameter. Now, radius is supposed to be twice as big as diameter. diameter equals 2 times radius. So if I go over here to my picture, I'm going to zoom in so I can draw this a little bit better. I'm going to have to insert extra arrows because I need twice as many sections to represent radius. So I'm going to go through here and I'm going to put R, 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 R. Sound like a pirate. R. And each one of these is supposed to represent radius. And I'm not going to write that on all of them. But once you go through here, if I trace over all of these, you'll find out that there's 6 of them. Okay, 6 line segments. It takes 6 radii or radius to go all the way around the circle. Now, if I need to show that in a formula or numerically, the way you find circumference using radius, circumference equals 2 pi r. Now, if I set this one up like I did the last one, circumference again is set up to be 15.708, and that's going to equal 2 pi r. And again, we know that pi is supposed to be 3.14, so I'm going to copy down 15.08. That equals 2 times pi times radius. This is the number that's missing. I don't know how much my radius was supposed to be, so I'm going to go as far as I can. 15.08 copied down again equals, I can go ahead and do 2 times 3.14, and that equals 6.28 times radius. So now I know that anytime I need radius, I would take the circumference amount and I would divide it by 6.28 because I'm always going to have to do 2 times pi right here. That's always going to be in the formula if I was setting up with real numbers. So just like on the last slide, I was showing you guys how to just use the symbols to show how circumference is related to diameter, but we're doing radius on this page. So I would say circumference divided by 2 radius equals pi, or I would say circumference divided by 2 pi equals r. Depending on what it's wanting you to determine, the relationship between the circumference and the other measurement on the circle, these would be the ways you could set it up. And again, this one is often used just so you can tell the relationship between the circumference and the radius. Now, if I look at an example that's a real life object, this says the distance all the way around the outside of the basketball is 28 inches. So some clue words so I know what I'm doing here. It says all the way around the outside. That is a clue for circumference. And it says that is 28 inches. So now I know that C equals 28. Okay, one of the questions that it wants me to answer is, what is the width of the basketball? So if you think about a square, okay, I have length and I have width. So that could be one whole segment. If I go up here and I look at this basketball, how wide the basketball is going to be from one side to another. let's say I do this with black. So it's basically going to be this line that goes all the way across the basketball. So down here where it says width, I'm going to write diameter. Now this is what I don't know. So if you think back to the last slide and remember what I did, I said circumference equals pi times diameter. Now the thing I know in this situation for the basketball is that C equals 28. So now I'm going to come down here and I'm going to put 28 in its spot. I'm going to substitute the numbers, the ones I know. So C is 28 equals, instead of pi, I'm always going to be using 3.14 and then times diameter, which again, diameter is the number I don't know. I don't know how wide the basketball is. So in order for me to isolate diameter and it to just tell me its length or width, I'm going to have to do the opposite of multiply. I need to divide. So the way I'm going to write that is 28 divided by 3.14 equals diameter. And again, if all you had to do was put the symbols, I'm going to put C divided by pi equals diameter. Now the last question on this page says, how far would it be from the outside edge into the center of the basketball? I'm only going to go to the center this time. And center means radius. If you only go to the center and you stop, that means radius. Now, I still have the same basketball, so the circumference is still 28. The only thing I need to change is the way I set up my formula, because now I'm trying to find radius. To do circumference using radius, it is C equals 2 pi r. I know that the circumference is still 28. I know I have a 2. Pi is always 3.14 times radius, which I don't know. I can go ahead and copy down 28. 2 times 3.14 is always going to be 6.28. And times radius, which is the thing I'm looking for. Now, I'm out of space on my screen, so I'm going to kind of scoot over to the right side. And to get r all by itself, I'm going to have to say 28 divided by 6.28 equals r. And then I would stop. If you had to really solve it, you would divide that out, but I'm not going to. If you just need to use the way to set it up using symbols, the only difference is there's a 2 in this equation. So it's going to say C divided by 2 pi equals r. And again, you probably won't have to do that very often, but that's something that might come up on a question.